Can you believe it? It is election eve, and there are still some undecided voters out there. I'm going to be speaking specifically about some of the undecided voters in Pennsylvania and why could that be? How is that even possible? How is it that you're just a day out from probably the most consequential election of your lifetime for many voters out there, including myself, obviously, and you still haven't made up your mind? And a lot of us will hear that and we're like, that is insane. That is impossible. Guys, I want you to know it isn't impossible. We are political nerds. It's as simple as that. There was a poll that came out over the weekend that had a lot of people freaking out initially, conservatives freaking out. The Des Moines Register poll, which tends to be a very accurate poll, especially when it comes to the primary season. They do a very good job. They did and they typically do during the primary season. But this time around, they did not get it right. And I'll talk to you about that in just a second. The poll that you saw surfaced, and Kevin McCullough of townhall.com wrote about that. Actually, he'll be co-hosting with me tomorrow evening, election night coverage. Actually, I want to say Wednesday morning, because we will both literally be in studio to offer our opinions to some of the people that will be broadcasting live for election night coverage. And he and I will be co-hosting from 3 to 5 a.m., perhaps even sooner. So on snc.tv, if you're one of those in the late night people and the race goes into the wee mornings of the night and you want to figure out who won and you still want some hot takes on the election, even on the election night, please tune in to snc.tv and you'll be able to catch myself and Kevin McCullough talking up the election. So it's going to be an all-nighter for us, but I'm looking forward to this. But again, the Des Moines Register poll came out showing that Harris was in the lead, I think 47 to 44. A lot of people panicked about that. A lot of conservatives did. And then there was an Emerson poll that came out that was actually more accurate. The Des Moines Register poll was actually dated back to October. This is in Kevin's article. I'll get through some of the details of that. The Emerson poll is fresh as of November. So Trump has a 10-point lead. I was listening to, I think it was Eric Erickson, who has worked on campaigns before, and he has said, listen, the way the behavior that Kamala Harris is stressing, she's not going to the battleground states where Trump still is. He's in North Carolina, I believe today, Pennsylvania, making 2 stops in Pennsylvania, and I think he's in Georgia. This is a guy that's doing 4 rallies today. I can't imagine how tired and wielding this is, but this is what it looks like when you're fighting for the country. Joe Biden, again, he must be a paid surrogate. Listen, I'm telling you, Joe Biden has to be a paid surrogate for the Trump campaign. It seems to me that he's doing everything he can to sabotage Kamala Harris. We just had Dinesh D'Souza on to speak about his movie Vindicating Trump a couple of nights ago. And now, since then, when we were told that Joe Biden was going to be placed in the closet, he has come out and he has made some more asinine comments when it comes to former President Donald Trump, and we will get into that as well. But you're asking the question, why is there still undecideds? And I'll make it clear. To me, the only reason they're undecided is because I believe that Trump has been demonized in the media so much so that people have focused on that. And let's be honest, Trump always gives the media a little bit of fodder instead of saying, if it's your normal, average, everyday, politician, they might be polished, but that's not what people are looking for right now. People are looking for an authentic fighter, and that's why they gravitate towards Trump. But sometimes, let's be honest, I know I would like to see him, especially during these last couple of weeks. I would have preferred Trump not say some of the things that he said. Now, I think it's baked into the cake, so it may or may not matter as much. We'll have to see if this Tony Hinchcliffe joke about Puerto Rico, how much it made an impact. We'll have to check that out in the exit polling. The same is true for Biden's comments when it comes to garbage. Will people fall for Kamala Harris? This is the lady that did not win a single primary vote, but was actually given the position, if you will, as a Democratic nominee, basically. And Joe Biden is completely spiteful for it. But there was a couple of columns that I want to go through just real quickly, just so that you understand what's going on. And so you understand, listen, there's still undecideds out there. I do believe, this is just my opinion, all right? This is just a matter of opinion because you can look at the polls on Real Clear Politics just like I can. You can look at the aggregate of polls. I would encourage you to check on those polls or click on those polls, and you can find out more information about those polls and whether they went after, if you will, or asked the questions of likely voters versus registered voters, so on, et cetera. That was the difference in the Des Moines Register poll, which, again, I will get into in just a minute here. I got plenty of video that I want to show as well. But again, undecided voters, we don't want to leave any voters on the table. If you haven't gotten out to vote early, make sure tomorrow is election day. Get your butt out and vote. I'll just be completely blunt with you. All right, I have been pressing early voting. I went out. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I'm just being real. So I went to the wrong location just because I didn't check my location. So I went to a place I assumed the voting would be at, and I pulled up and I was like, "What's up with all these kids in preppy uniforms walking back and forth to classrooms?" The place that I normally go vote, I didn't check the early voting locations. So I drove to the wrong place like a complete and utter idiot. And then I was like, okay, I'm not driving to this other place right now. Went back Saturday morning, and the line for early voting right here in Central Florida was so long, it was ridiculous. So I must admit, I will be voting early no matter what. I don't care if there's a snowstorm in Florida. I don't care if it doesn't matter. I am getting out to vote. I'm casting my vote not just for former President Donald Trump, but I'm going down the line when it comes to our Senate campaigns. I am going down the line when it comes to some of our local races. I am voting no on the vast majority of these amendments, and make sure you do the same, because a lot of these amendments and ballot initiatives are a way to actually circumvent the voter. They always say, these people that put these ballot initiatives on or these amendments on, oh, it's a way to, it's direct democracy. It's a way of going directly to the voter. No, because they never put all of the information in there. They just try to gaslight you. And surely that typically on the other side of those amendments, many of them anyway, and I would argue the vast majority of them, there's some type of donor that's going to benefit monetarily from some of these amendments. Case in point is the case with Amendments 3 and 4 out here in the state of Florida. So I will be voting no on both of those. One is to make weed recreational. The other is to basically codify abortion all the way up to 9 months inside of the state of Florida, and make Florida abortion tourism state and an abortion mill state, basically. But even when it comes to Amendment 3 and recreational marijuana, there's a lot of foolish people, sadly, even on the right, that believe, oh, yeah, freedom is what freedom does, or, some crap like that. And we shouldn't be regulating people's freedom to do that. Okay, well, if you're somebody that's sitting at your home and you're smoking weed and all this kind of stuff, but you don't have a right to encroach on my freedoms. I don't want weed in my face. And by the way, it's a complete and utter lie that people are going to prison for weed. The vast majority of people that go to prison for that might get charged with any type of weed thing, it's either going to be a misdemeanor, or they've got other stronger charges, more damning charges against them, and they'll plead to having weed on them or something like that. There's not one person in the state of Florida that's in prison for literally just selling weed. And yet there's ads from the donors of this campaign, this Amendment 3, that are going to benefit tremendously from that. Okay, so there are some undecided voters still in Pennsylvania. Again, how could this be? How could this be? Well, it happens. It happens. There's people out there that simply don't pay attention to politics like you and I. Nikki Haley came out over the weekend, and she gave a great closing argument for President Donald Trump. And I got to tell you that I think both Nikki Haley, and I'm not a fan of Nikki Haley, I'll just be real with you. I think you guys know, if you've paid attention to this podcast. By the way, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. All right. So please make sure that you do that. But I'm not the biggest fan of Nikki Haley. Nonetheless, the lady can drive home a message like nobody's business, because she knows her talking points. She knows how to stay focused. But she's different than Kamala Harris. Besides the fact that she's smart. She actually knows the issues. I may disagree with Nikki Haley on some of the issues, some of which I do. But she knows the issues. There's no doubting that Nikki Haley knows her stuff. And I think she gave a great closing argument for former President Donald Trump. I think J.D. Vance does the same thing. I think he can communicate Trump's policies better than Trump can. But Trump has the backbone the know-how and the willpower to make sure those policies are put in place. All right. So that is the major difference. And frankly, I think if Trump was as good of a communicator as a Nikki Haley or a JD Vance and more focused, he would be running away with this race right now. And he may well be. As far as the polling is concerned, let me just do this real quick because obviously this is elections night eve. There's a couple of headlines that you should know about before I get to some of the polling and get to these undecided voters. And Representative Rashida Tlaib declines to endorse Kamala Harris. So Rashida Tlaib, the Democrat from Michigan, has refused to endorse VP Harris at a rally in Detroit, Michigan. I think that is big news. Obviously, she's upset with the fact that that Kamala Harris isn't saying more, or she's playing both sides of the fence when it comes to Israel and the Islamic terrorists, whether they're Hamas, Hezbollah, or the mullahs of Iran. And she wants that to be stopped. But this lady, if she were to move to those areas of the world, she would want to come to America, and she would probably be voting conservative. Joe Biden has another gaffe. We'll get to that as well. The lawsuit filed against Colorado Secretary of State for attempting to cover up leak of voting machine passwords. So you guys may not know this, but the Colorado Libertarian Party has sued Jenna Griswold. She's the Secretary of State for Colorado, and her chief deputy on Friday in Denver, Colorado, asking the court to decommission voting equipment and order a hand count of ballots in counties affected by the recently discovered online disclosure of hundreds of election equipment passwords. Hannah Gutman is the Miners Party state chair. James Wiley, the Libertarian nominee in the 3rd Congressional District, argue in a lawsuit filed in Denver District Court that Griswold and Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Beall breached their public duties with the leak and their responses to it. These people are grossly incompetent, and they're just bad politicians as well. I hope that this lady loses her next election. She's been a disaster for the state of Colorado. Here's some news that's not so promising, and this is why I think this election cycle is so crucial. Biden authorizes Homeland Security to hastily grant temporary status to as many illegal aliens as possible before his term ends. This, according to the Daily Wire. The Biden-Harris administration has authorized massive overtime so Department of Homeland Security agents can grant temporary status to as many illegal immigrants as possible before a new president is inaugurated. That's disgusting. A Homeland Security agent told the Daily Wire. Jason is an alias given to the agent, said supervisors have told workers in recent weeks that they should aim to clear the backlog of temporary protected status applications within 120 days. Doing so would allow these illegal immigrants to live and work in the country and shield them from deportation for 2 years. That's why I am a little discouraged that a lot of these illegals are not going to be removed from the United States, even when it comes to mass deportation. I think it's very important that Trump wins this election. Otherwise, I think they all stay. I do believe that some will be removed, and there can be some policies that are put in place to discourage employers from hiring them and to make sure that they're not put on voter rolls. But if we don't win this election, I don't think that happens. I think the vast majority of them might be here to stay anyway. Iran's retaliation against Israel will be strong and complex, according to the Wall Street Journal. Amid U.S. warnings against a counterattack on Israel, Iran is sending a defiant diplomatic message. It is planning a complex response involving even more powerful warheads and other weapons. Listen, I'll just say this. I hope that tomorrow and right now, Israel has launched a ground offensive in Syria. I hope they do whatever they need to do to dismantle the mullahs of Iran. This stuff needs to end, and that's the only way that it ends. And I think maybe after the election, it'll end either way. Okay, so let me get to this. There was a column that was in the Daily Wire entitled "Exclusive: 7 Undecided Pennsylvania Voters Say What's Driving Their Decision." Ooh, I got to go through this really relatively quickly because I got another appointment to make. All right, so you have polling that consistently shows that the state of Pennsylvania is in a dead heat. All right. So the Daily Wire convened a focus group, and again, there's still this is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Pennsylvania has 19 electoral college votes, 19 electoral college votes. So that can decide the election. If Trump loses that, it's going to be hard for him to win, even though he has other avenues. If Harris loses that, I mean, I think the game is over for her. So most of the voters that they polled in this focus group or that they spoke to like Trump's policies, but they couldn't stand his personality. So that seems to be the overwhelming factor. I'll go through some of the things that they said. The political analytics firm Signal gathered 7 undecided Pennsylvania voters from Erie and Northampton counties, which have gone for the winner of every presidential election since 2008. So that would be Barack Obama, the year he became the president of the United States, or won the nomination to become, or won the election to become the president of the United States. These voters want to hear who's going to make the best pitch on the issues that matter most to them. So that's why I say these little things matter. The jokes, we have to wait and see with the exit polling what literally happened the day of the election. But that's why I think some of these gaffes matter. And I want to make sure that we go through some of these. But here's what they say. One of them was quoted as saying to an undecided Republican. Here's a quote from that person. All right. They're both kind of touring with celebrities and making it all about them. This voter's name is Tiffany. She's a Republican between the ages of 30 and 44 who voted for Trump in 2020, but now thinks she's more likely to vote for Harris. She says that's not resonating. That's not fixing anything. That's not discussing the issues. That's just making it about yourself, she says. Voters largely, again, agreed with Trump's policies, but they were put off by his personality. The participants also dinged Harris, though, listen to this, for flip-flopping, and even those who are leaning towards the Democrats said they were put off by her aggressive focus on abortion. All right. So even though there are ladies out there that are pro-choice, they just feel like she is talking about abortion way too aggressively. And they actually mention that in here. The biggest issues, and again, you have both Trump and Harris spending the day in Pittsburgh, but Trump doing 2 rallies in Pennsylvania, Harris only doing 1 as far as I know. I could be wrong on that. Inflation and the economy are the top issues of these particular voters. Mike is one of the independent voters between the ages of 45 and 54 who voted for a third party candidate in 2020. And he spoke for much of the group when he talked about the impact of inflation. Here's what he had to say. Today, I stopped at the grocery store. I needed 2 packs of batteries, he said, some hot dog buns and something else. And it was $40, like $40, he said. We can't sustain this level, especially when I haven't seen a pay increase in 4 years. So again, 40 times the issue of inflation and rising costs came up in that focus groups. The people were unimpressed about Kamala's price controls argument. So they're not buying that issue. Ironically, even Kamala supporters were concerned about big government spending, which is absolutely weird to me. But this goes to show you that a lot of people, even though they like Trump's policies, they still hate him. Now, the question is, will people vote against their best interest? And I think there's a lot of moralists out there. At least if you don't go to church and you don't know God and you're on the left, you're probably a moralist and you're like, oh man, I hate that guy. He's bad. And so you get all emotional and you get worked up instead of saying, wait a minute. Let me take a step back. What's best for the country? What's best for my fellow man? No, none of these guys are perfect, but what's best? All right, let me just share this real quick because Nikki Haley, I think, gave a better closing argument than personally, if I'm just being real, that Trump can. Here's what she said, and I'm skipping through the article. Basically, she says millions of people love Donald Trump and millions hate him. Each group will vote accordingly. But there are also millions whose views on Mr. Trump are mixed. They like much of what he did as president and agree with most of his policies. I'm quoting verbatim, but they dislike his tone and can't condone his excesses, such as his conduct on January 6th of 2021. This third group of Americans will determine whether the former president returns to the White House. To that group, she points out numbers. I'll point out that Trump isn't the only one on the ballot. This election isn't a referendum on him. It's a choice between him and Kamala Harris. And she lays out policy positions. She says, I don't agree with Trump 100% of the time. But I do agree with him most of the time, and I disagree with Ms. Harris nearly all the time. That makes this an easy call. Here are the facts that are most relevant to me, she says. Americans today, on average, face some $13,000 in higher annual costs than they did 4 years ago. $13,000 more in annual costs. Now, if you're a middle class voter, you simply can't. You can't sustain that. If you're really poor, you may be able to get government, welfare, some government cheese. But if you're in the middle class, that is a huge hit. If you're rich, that's nothing to you, right? Prices on nearly everything, food, gasoline, utility bills, insurance have gone up. This is the direct result of the Biden-Harris agenda, which stoked inflation and stuck families with the bill. See, I love this argument. The Biden-Harris administration stuck middle-class families with a $13,000 bill that we simply cannot afford. It has reached nearly $36 trillion, speaking of the national debt. That's another bill that we're stuck with, thanks in part to Mrs. Harris's tie-breaking votes on the grossly misnamed American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act. Despite its title, the latter is still boosting inflation. Its estimated price tag has more than doubled since President Biden signed it, and it is funding projects that are largely stalled. As president, Ms. Harris would make America's fiscal crisis even worse. Then there's national security. The Biden-Harris agenda has made the world far more dangerous. Our southern border is our most pressing security threat. Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris have made it dramatically worse. Their debacle in Afghanistan not only created a new terrorist state, it also signaled weaknesses that sparked Russia's war against Ukraine. Their appeasement of Iran has enriched that despotic regime and emboldened it to pursue war with Israel through its terrorist proxies. And the administration's weakness toward China has done nothing to impede the communist power expansion at our expense, she writes. This is a world that Biden-Harris failures have given us in four short years. A Trump administration would be different. It wouldn't be perfect, but I agree with Mr. Trump that we need to keep taxes low and cut them more. I agree that we need to roll back trillions of dollars in special interest handouts. And I agree that we need to expand American energy to empower our families and job creators while making us less dependent on foreign energy. So I agree with Mr. Trump that America should be strong, far stronger than we are today. When he was president, Russia didn't invade another country. Iran was on its heels. China received serious pushback for the first time in decades, and our southern border was more secure. The world is unsafe under Biden-Harris, and we shouldn't expect that to change under a Harris administration. These are enormous policy differences that will affect the lives of every American and much of the world. Hey, Carl Jackson here. A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving MyPillow with a ton of extra MyPillows. But you know what? That's their loss, and it is your gain. For the first time ever, you can get a standard classic MyPillow for wholesale prices. That's just $14.88, but it gets even better. For a limited time, they're offering their entire classic collection at wholesale prices. So you can get a queen size MyPillow for just $18.88 or upgrade to a king size for just $1 more. You can get the body pillows for $29.88 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.88. Go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Carl, C-A-R-L, or call 800-858-0263 to take advantage of this wholesale pricing for the first time ever. And on top of that, receive free shipping on orders that are over $75. They have never been offered this low before. There are limited quantities at this price, so the limit is 10. And once they're gone, they are gone. Again, go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Carl, or give them a call at 800-858-0263. Again, use promo code Carl to get the standard MyPillow for just $14.88, the lowest price ever. All right, so let me go to some of the video, and because there's even more breaking news. It just doesn't appear that Kamala Harris is doing well in some of these battleground states, but still in Pennsylvania, there's still some undecideds. And again, we're wondering why there are undecideds, but believe it or not, they exist. And I believe, or at least I hope, that many of them will choose their best interest and break in favor of Trump, Vance, and go along down the, vote for down ballot tickets. But here we have, this is video clip number 1. I want to play for you. This is Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, basically being grilled by Shannon Bream of Fox News on Sunday. Just basic questions. And she's talking about the horrendous job numbers that we got, the jobs report. where I mean, fewer than I think there were only about 12,000 jobs created last month, and the numbers have been revised down. I mean, it's been absolutely insane. One of the worst jobs reports that we've gotten in generations. So I believe we were expecting about 110,000 jobs. We got about 12,000 jobs, so nearly 100,000 fewer jobs that were reported for the month of October. Here's Shannon Bream of Fox News Sunday grilling Senator Mark Kelly about it. Video clip number 1, please, Gabe.
So let's talk more broadly, though, about the economy, because there are people now who say that they're having a tough time struggling to put things together, 2 or 3 jobs to keep themselves going. That. Horrible jobs report on Friday, and people want to point to a lot of different things, a couple of big storms, but 12,000 jobs created, and those were government jobs. The private sector actually lost jobs in the last jobs report, and both August and September were revised downward for more than 112,000 jobs that were reported to happen that didn't happen. That follows earlier in the summer when we were told that the previous March to March, 818,000 jobs that were reported as created weren't created. So people are saying my personal situation, the way that I vote is going to be impacted by what I'm experiencing, and it's not good. And they don't feel like they've heard enough. Even some Democrats will say from the vice president an articulation of why she didn't do things differently under this administration and how she's going to make concrete changes. So voters
I think it simply comes down to the fact that she has a plan.
Okay, and what is her plan? To end price gouging in grocery stores that have 1 or 2% markups on their products. It's absolutely insane. She has a third grade level understanding of the economy. And I want to go right on down the line. This is video clip number 2. Here you have Caroline Leavitt, a spokesperson for the Trump campaign. What was she on? She was on ABC News, and they were talking about Donald Trump doubling down on controversial war hawk comments about Representative Liz Cheney. And obviously, I'm not playing, for the sake of time, I'm not playing the video clip for you guys, but you had former President Trump on Tucker Carlson's, or on stage with Tucker Carlson, formerly of Fox News, now with Tucker Carlson Network, his own network. And he was talking about Liz Cheney and guns being trained on her, basically saying what we all knew. Even the left are coming out and saying, come on, guys, don't take this out of context. All Trump was saying in that interview was like, listen, Liz Cheney wouldn't be such a war hawk if she was on the battlefield. It's as simple as that. And the left tried to run with it. It is not working. Here's Caroline Leavitt not only defending it, but going on the attack on ABC. Video clip number 2. Por favor, Gabe.
You want to talk about violence against political opponents? Let's talk about the fact that Democrats have been labeling President Trump a threat to democracy for the better half of 10 years. Let's talk about how they have compared him to Hitler, one of the worst mass murderers in the history of the world, and that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden weaponized the court system and the justice system in this country against Donald Trump in an attempt to imprison him. He sat through a courthouse for 7 weeks this past year, and the Democrats were hoping he would go to jail for it. That is real political violence that has led to 2 heinous assassination attempts on President Trump's life that, by the grace of God, he was able to escape, and he is here with us today. So yes, President Trump knows a little bit about political violence because he's experienced it himself. And talking about the tragic realities of war that Liz Cheney and her father, Dick Cheney, have got this country into is not political violence. It's talking about the reality of the foreign conflicts that the Washington, D.C. establishment have sold out young Americans to for decades.
We can leave it there. Basically, ABC tried to talk about Trump and political violence and his speech and how it's, violence towards Liz Cheney, all this kind of nonsense. And Caroline Leavitt just tore her up. I mean, just tore her up. She was ready for that nonsense. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. Everybody knows what Trump was saying. He's not the most articulate when it comes to, or he's inarticulate sometimes when it comes to the way that he words things, but we understand what he means. The left understands what he means, but because of his the way that he words things, it's easy to put him in sound bites, and the left capitalizes on it. Let's just be real about it, and that's why I was mentioning Nikki Haley's, or read Nikki Haley's, or at least part of her column. J.D. Vance does a great job, but we know Trump will do a good job as president. But when it comes to drilling down on a specific line talking point, that's just not something he's good at doing. Marketing, he's great at. McDonald's, the garbage truck, so on, etc. And he really gains favor with that. Here's Joe Biden sabotaging in video clip number 3, sabotaging Harris-Walz campaign yet again. Let's go ahead and roll that, please, Gabe.
Now, I know some of you guys are tempted to think it's macho guy. I'll tell you what, man. When I was in Scranton, we used to have a little trouble going down the plot once in a while from Greenwich. But I'm serious. These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
All right. So now keep in mind, you have the Kamala Harris campaign, the Harris-Walz campaign, trying to say that Trump is a threat to democracy. Trump is Hitler. Trump supporters are Nazis, so on, et cetera. And then you have the president of the United States. Kamala Harris is still the vice president of the United States, obviously, talking about how he'd like to smack Trump in the tushy. So the left is trying to make up this narrative that Trump wants to be violent and revengeful and go after his political opponents, while they're the ones that are actually doing it. They're the ones with the threatening language that's being used. It's absolutely astonishing to me what's going on. And then we have this Kamala Harris proposition. You guys heard about this Proposition 36. I'm running these videos because I don't understand why people can be so undecided, except to say that people are emotionally tied to their hatred for Trump. You have to get that. And that's what overwhelmingly we saw in this Daily Wire focus group, that people literally, even some of the Kamala Harris supporters in that focus group of 7, basically said what they liked about Trump inadvertently. It's weird. Listen to this. These voters say they would like to see less American wealth going overseas. That's an issue that Trump has been hammering. Here's a quote from one of them. We need to find a way to get rid of our debt and pay it down, such as calling in all the loans we've given to foreign nations recently. One of the lady that I'm speaking of, her name is Tiffany. She's pro-choice, but again, she doesn't like how hard Harris is pushing abortion. She finds some of Harris's ads on abortions pretty offensive. She said, I don't like it being used as a scare tactic. Some of these commercials are like, as a woman, I should want to vote for a pro-choice candidate because I could get raped and need an abortion. I find that a little inappropriate for campaigning. All right. But Trump's biggest liability, again, is his personality. As I mentioned before, one of them liken him to a peacock. Everything he does is based on how he looks. They were asked to compare him to some type of animal. And then another one says he's like an ape because he's strong but ham-fisted, while another described him as a bull in a china shop. A fourth said that Trump was like a pigeon because a lot of times he just, S's on he S's on everything. And one of them said, they worry that Trump's style could hurt the United States on the world stage. This is proof positive that we don't have a media that's conveying the truth to these people. The truth of the matter is, under former President Donald Trump, Russia did not invade Ukraine. China was not on the march trying to get an advantage over Taiwan and hoping to take over Taiwan. You had Hamas and Hezbollah, Iran. Not attacking Iran was basically, the mullahs of Iran were basically bankrupt and they weren't able to attack Israel. I don't think there would have been an October 7th if Trump were in office. This is absolutely insane. The fact that North Korea, you have North Korea testing in ballistic missiles or ICBMs, and none of that stuff was happening under Trump. I think they did it once, maybe twice, I'm not sure. And then Trump named him Rocket Man and told him that he would send fire and brimstone, the likes of which he never seen. And then it stopped. So I just disagree with that part. Let me play a couple more clips for you. Let's go to video clip. I think this is number 5. Kamala Harris, I was talking about on Proposition 36. For those of you that are wondering, there shouldn't be any undecideds. Just so that you know what Proposition 36 is. Proposition 36 would increase the sentences for drug trafficking, and it would end the mass theft that you see. You know that where you can steal up to $950 not being prosecuted as if someone's counting. So you could literally steal, $2,000 worth of stuff. Who's running behind you to check the price tags? You know what I'm saying? How do they know what you stole if you're wrapping them up? It's absolutely insane. But she wouldn't even answer that. Video clip number 5. Let's roll that real quick. Por favor, Gabe.
Madam Vice President, have you returned the ballot to California, and how did you vote on Prop 36?
So my ballot is on its way to California, and I'm going to trust the system that it will arrive there. And I am not going to talk about the vote on that because, honestly, it's the Sunday before the election, and I don't intend to create an endorsement one way or another around it.
See, okay, that's the weirdest thing ever. This was the former AG of California. She believed in Proposition, 47 that allowed people to that legalize theft inside of the state. Just absolutely insane. But she doesn't want to talk about what is this Proposition 36. Why doesn't she want to talk about Proposition 36? Because she doesn't want you to know that she's a radical. And it's videos like that makes me think she's losing this race, and she knows it. Because if she says, yeah, I am for Proposition 36, then all of a sudden she has to give up this narrative that she's a moderate, that she's going to be different or less radical than the Biden administration. No, she is a radical. She is even more radical than Joe Biden. Joe Biden got historians in or brought them in to figure out how he could be more like FDR. This is a chick that is born and raised by Marxists and has those leanings. And she governed like that when she was the AG in California, even when she was a prosecutor. I mean, some of the stuff, the lady was absolutely obsessed with power. So when she doesn't speak of Proposition 36 or refuses to answer questions on it because she doesn't want to sway the election one way or the other, what's wrong with talking about what you really believe? Except you don't want to scare voters off. That leads me to believe that she's losing, at least right now. There's some news out, and we'll get to this in a later podcast that we'll release tomorrow before the election results are in. There's some news with this early voting in these battleground states. It is not going well for the Democrat Party and for Kamala Harris at all. Now, there may be some mass, maybe Democrats will vote in mass on election day, but that's highly unlikely given the fact that Republicans typically do. Even when it comes to mail-in ballots in some of these swing states, Democrats are underperforming when it comes to that. So we'll get into that at a later time. Let me play one more video clip for you. This is John Fetterman on the Joe Rogan podcast. You got John Fetterman that had a stroke. He was willing to go on Joe Rogan. You got Vice President Kamala Harris running for the presidency that was unwilling to sit with Joe Rogan. Let's go ahead and roll video clip number 8, please, Gabe.
Legitimate outsider. This is the appeal. The appeal is that people think that this system is completely rigged and it's captured by money and special interests and enormous corporations, and that here's a guy who's outside of this system
did it freeze?
Completely. And the evidence of that is how the system turned against him.
Okay.
And how you got to see people on television every night talking about Russiagate, talking about how he's a puppet of Putin, talking about the Steele dossier, talking about all these different things that turned out to not be true. And it further cemented.
I never bought into some of that kind of a stuff, because if anyone that spent any time on the ground in one of those states, it's very clear that wasn't because of some small kinds of tweets and things like whatever. It's undeniable, and also remember, he was. The Republican Party was like, "Hey, this is a joke," and I remember Jeb Bush, and he had like $100 or $200 million, and he just went by. He ticked him off.
We'll cut it.
Even then, people thought
we'll cut it here. This interview goes on. I got to tell you more and more. I totally disagree with this guy's politics, but you don't go on Joe Rogan unless you're willing to be yourself, unless you're real, regardless of where the chips may fall. But there are a lot of undecided voters out there. Guys, make sure you get to those undecided voters. Encourage them. Don't beat them over the head. Don't beat them over the head. You know what I mean? Some people just can't stand Trump. That's just the way that it is. Some people love him. Some people hate him. They can't stand him. But the issue are always the policies. I remember years ago going to a 5,000 year leap conference that was put on by a gentleman here locally. And the gentleman speaking for, I forget the name of the Constitutional Center or what have you. I forget the name of it right now, and the name escapes me. And he said, basically, when it comes to voting, all you have to ask yourself with any given policy, take time, take a deep breath, and think. Does this give the government more power, or does this policy give the people more power? And if it gives the government more power, you vote against it. When Kamala Harris talks about all these things that she wants to do for you at the federal level, that means that you're going to have to entrust her with more power. But that power, if let's say another Republican gets in and you want to vote for him, that means that Republican walks in with that power too. And if you can't stand Republicans, then you shouldn't vote for even a Democrat getting more power. The Bill of Rights is what you need to focus on. It's really as simple as that. And I know there's a lot of Christians out there that don't want to pull the lever for Trump. I couldn't stand Trump back in 2016. I mean, couldn't stand the guy. All right. So you know what I'm saying? I get it. But once he got in and he has a record that we can look back and say, okay, he did this. We can look at all of his moral failures. Yes. And I'm not going to defend him on any of that stuff. And we could look at Kamala Harris's moral failures. We are where we are, sadly, in my opinion, because Christians sit out and they refuse to vote. And then they have the audacity to complain about the politicians that we have to vote for. Meanwhile, they've been silent for decades or refused to vote. Oh, I don't want to vote for that guy. I'm too there. He's this, he's that. I don't want to vote for. So the quality of candidates that we get, in my opinion, are clearly the fault, at least in my mind, of the evangelical movement, because we refuse to vote. And so now our voices haven't been heard. Having said all of that, our voices can be heard in this election. It isn't the lesser of two evils. One candidate is going to bring us closer to freedom. I believe that's Trump. Another candidate is going to take us further away from individual freedoms. And I believe that's Kamala Harris. And that's why I have no problem pulling the lever for Trump, because I believe he gives me the option to live to fight another day in this free country that we call America. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. There are still some undecideds out there. I hope that you will go cast your ballot tomorrow, not just for former President Trump, for those of you that haven't voted yet, but I pray and ask that you would consider making sure that you go down the ballot and vote for the conservative, the constitutionalist in the race. And if you are confused about any ballot initiative, about any amendment, leave it blank or vote no. All right. Because all of those things, all they do ultimately is circumvent the voter. There are some good ones out there, but if you're confused about it, you do not have to fill it in. Leave it blank. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in. Until next time, do not grow weary doing good. God bless you.